Beauty and Brains presents A Work in Progress, your favorite weekly podcast all about navigating adulthood and adversity with transparency and vulnerability. Here, we highlight progress over perfection. You're listening to my personal and professional development diary, where I share the highs and lows and the real and raw parts of the story that no one talks about. I'm your host, Brelynn Hunt, A Work in Progress. Dear friend, I hope all is well with you and that you are as healthy in body as you are sound in mind and strong in spirit. Welcome back to another episode of A Work in Progress, the podcast. I'm really excited for today's podcast episode. I know that you all have just listened to my last podcast episode, which was a bit of a Debbie Downer. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not going yay. I know that it was a sad one, but it was an honest and a real one, and I'm so appreciative for you all just being so loving and supportive of me during my time of grief and hardship and transition. So thank you so much for all of your kind comments on the last podcast episode. In that episode, I told you guys that I was going to be on my Zoom and uploading videos back to back, catching you guys up on all the things that you missed from the time that I kind of fell off the face of the earth. And one of those big moments that you all missed was my Miss DC pageant experience. So as you guys saw, and if you haven't, first of all, shout out to our audio listeners. If you are listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to your podcast, thank you for being an audio listener. Please go ahead, pause, and rate the podcast 5 stars only, and also leave me a review. I love reading all reviews. They literally make my entire day. But if you are a subscriber, a double major, which means you major in beauty and brains, the OGs know. If you are a double major, you see that I have uploaded the 2024 Miss DC pageant vlog, and because of that, I have gotten a lot of comments, sweet messages from you all. I also posted a picture on Instagram, so if you're not following me on YouTube, definitely do so at Brelynn/Beauty and Brains, and on Instagram at Brelynn.Hunt, because if you're just listening to the podcast, you're probably like, what is today's video all about? Well, you may not be able to tell by the title, but this is going to be my last pageant diary. And I think it's actually going to be a really good episode. I thought it was going to be another sad one. Like, I thought that all of my podcast episodes kind of leading up were going to just be breaking down, again, the different hardships that I've been going through in this past season. And so therefore they weren't going to be fun. But as I was creating the manuscript and thinking about what I wanted to share, I was like, I need to do a tell-all. Like, I have to do a tell-all on my pageant experience, because there is actually so much that you all don't know about my pageant experience, from the beginning to secret pageants in between. And so in today's podcast episode, I'm going to share my full pageant story. And then of course, I'm going to talk to you all about my last and final pageant, when despite my dreams, planning, hard work, dedication, patience, and perseverance, God said no. And to that, before I get into my full pageant story and all of the tea, I wanted to read a letter that I wrote to all the pageant girls. Dear pageant girl, I see you. I see your courage in chasing dreams that are as bold as they are glamorous, yet as humble as the servant leadership Christ calls us to. I know how much it takes to put yourself out there for a dream this big. You pour your heart into every detail, whether it's choosing the right hairstyle, finding the perfect dress, perfecting your talent, or rehearsing countless interview questions. You give your all to make a lasting impact on your community. Yet, there's always that uncertainty. Will this be your year? Will the judges see all that you've worked for? And then there's the wildest part of it all. After facing the ups and downs, you still rise with hope, with faith, and with the belief in yourself. You return to the drawing board, determined to grow and push harder, ready to reach for the dream again. And that is a special kind of strength. It's crazy courageous. If no one else has told you today, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I'm proud of the pageant girl who made it happen on a low budget. I'm proud of the pageant girl who pushed through without a coach. I'm proud of the girl who competes when no one of her race has ever held the crown. I'm proud of the girl who came back after not placing, and the one who fell on stage but rose with grace. I'm proud of the girl who faced her fear of speaking on stage even when it didn't go perfectly. I'm proud of the girl who poured her heart out in a private interview and showed her truest, most vulnerable self. I'm proud of the girl who worked hard to feel confident in her fitness competition. And I'm proud of the girl who smiled through it all, waving to a crowd when no one from her family could be there to support her. The world may not always see the work, the emotions, the friendships, or the insecurities you face. They may not understand the longing for your dream to finally come true, to feel that sash across your shoulder and a crown on your head. But I see you. And no matter the outcome, win or lose, you will always be a pageant girl. You've gained memories, experiences, and friendships that will last a lifetime. You are courageous, resilient, fearless, community-oriented, kind, smart, and talented. Not just because of what you do, but because of who you are. So I hope in the midst of it all, you're proud of yourself, because I am proud of you. With love and encouragement, your retired pageant sister. Yes, you guys, it is official. I am retired. I am a retired pageant girl. I can't believe it. It is so bittersweet. It is mainly hard to have watched the footage back from the vlog and kind of relive it again through the pictures and look up and be like, dang, that's crazy. Like, I actually didn't. I sound so crazy. If you all don't know, like, my personality, my story, this is going to be giving you all the pageant lore. And so hopefully you know that I'm not a super cocky person. I, of course, have confidence and I have faith and I have belief in myself, and I also work very hard, but I like to say that I am still a very humble person. So if I ever say anything that you feel like can come off as a little arrogant, it's probably because I've worked so hard on something that I think that I have the right to say it, or I'm like absolutely joking. And sometimes it doesn't come off, especially like if you're just listening to the podcast, you may be like, who is this girl? Life is short, I'm just a girl, I'm just kikiing. Also, if you are not into the pageant world, if you're not into the pageant lore, there are so many lessons that I want to share with you all about what I've learned throughout my pageant journey that I feel like can help people out, no matter if you have never done a pageant, never want to do a pageant, never watched a pageant, never cared about a pageant. I still feel like there is a lot of lessons and a lot of things we can take away from situations when God says no. So without further ado, I'm not going yay. This is actually a re-record. I recorded an hour of the podcast yesterday before going to church, and I was just and it was so weird because I actually had I always kind of have a little bit of anxiety before filming a podcast. Nothing too major, but sometimes it does make me procrastinate filming the podcast because I just don't like the feeling. And as soon as I sit down, I'm so happy to talk to you all and I get excited and I enjoy myself and I end up talking way more than I thought that I would have. This is definitely going to be a long podcast. I'm not sure if it's going to be a part 1 and part 2. If so, just make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But if not, it's definitely going to be a long one. So A, get your snacks. B, make sure that you share this, maybe watch it with a friend. The reason why I scrapped that footage is because I was talking so much. I just can't go into as much detail telling these stories as I did previously because I know that our attention spans are super short nowadays. Oh, also, last thing before we get started, I'm so sorry, so much groundkeeping. But if you are watching the video podcast, isn't this like the cutest little thing in my background? I decided that since we are talking about my pageant experience, that I would have all of my Miss America sashes behind me. I just thought it would be a good nod to my Miss America dreams coming to an end. Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, let's get into my pageant origin story, which actually starts off a little bit before I entered college. I'm not sure if I told this story before online, but let me try and make it quick. So a lot of you all know that before I entered college, my dream school was North Carolina A&T. This is an HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina, and a lot of people from the DMV go to NCAT. I loved the school. I loved the culture. They seemed like they had a lot of fun, and I really, really, really loved the band dancers. And you guys know, like, the main thing that got my attention to attend an HBCU was being a band dancer. So in around, I don't really remember the timeline of it. It's literally been like 10 years. Which is crazy. That is embarrassing. Anyway, ended up getting accepted into NCAT, as well as a couple of my friends, because mind you, a lot of people from the DMV end up going to NCAT. So they had this thing which was like Admitted Students Day, and it was in the fall. Like, I remember it being before Christmas because I hadn't been accepted to Spelman yet. I drive down with my mom and my dad, and some of my other friends, they also end up driving down with their families, and then we all end up coming to the welcome ceremony together. I really don't remember. You guys are going to hear me say things like I really don't remember a lot because I actually have not a great memory, especially when it comes to situations that happen in college. And honestly, a lot of it is due to trauma. But anyway, I remember sitting in the bleachers and I had about 4 of my high school friends who were also considering matriculating into NCAT. I don't remember much about the ceremony except for the fact that it was really boring. Like, we were just sitting there listening to person after person after person talk. And I remember kind of like falling asleep in my chair. And then all of a sudden, here comes this brown little girl in a business dress and heels. She walks over to the podium in her heels and she addresses the audience. Good morning. I said, good morning, future Aggies. My name is, I don't remember her name, I don't remember the year, let's just say 133rd, Miss North Carolina Agricultural and State Technical University. And and I remember everybody in the auditorium kind of like waking up and coming to life because she just captivated the entire room. And it wasn't even an auditorium, like we were in like the gymnasium. So I remember the entire gymnasium kind of like waking up because she grabbed everyone's attention. And literally there were maybe like, again, 4 of my friends there. And I remember I was like on the end and everybody kind of looked over at me and was like, Brelynn, that is you. Like, that gives you. And I really don't have much language to describe exactly what they saw in me at that time as a high schooler and what they saw in just like the few words that this woman said to kind of pair me up with her. But it was like the biggest compliment and also the time that I had felt like the most seen. And I replayed this moment back with even people who have now graduated from NCAT to be like, do you remember that moment? And then being like, yes, like it just was one of those things where we all saw her and we could clearly see that you could be in that position one day if you wanted to be. So from that moment on, I was like, I don't know who Miss NCAT is, and I don't know what Miss NCAT does. All I know is that I want to do that. Fast forward, as a lot of you all know, I decided to go to Spelman College instead of NCAT. What's really unique about Spell House in particular is that there are both girl and boy campus queens. First of all, if you all are unfamiliar, especially if you're coming from the Miss America world, pageants on HBCU campuses are a really big deal. And they vary depending on what your campus is like. Like every campus has a different campus queen culture. For example, at some HBCUs, the campus queens are part of the SGA. Some campus queens get paid, they get housing. Some campus queens competitions run like a regular pageant. Some of them are like an election. What makes Spell House queens very interesting is that there are Spelman queens and there are Morehouse queens. Again, if you guys are unfamiliar, Spelman College is an all-women's historically Black college, and Morehouse College is our unofficial brother school, which is literally connected like the land. We are right next to each other in Atlanta, Georgia, but they are an all males historically Black college. So in a lot of extracurricular ways, the schools are combined. So the boys will have the girls be their cheerleaders. They will have the girls from Spelman College be their dancers. They will have the girls from Spelman College play in the band. And they will have the girls from Spelman College represent different areas of either the fraternities, their dorms, or their entire college campus as their queens. So fast forward, I'm a freshman at Spelman. My first introduction into our campus queens actually wasn't Miss Spelman and her royal court. script, but it was actually Miss Maroon and White. And that is basically the Miss Morehouse College. And I will always give props to Miss Reese Botts because that was my freshman year MMW, or Miss Maroon and White. And she was just everything to me. She was beautiful. She was gracious. She was nice. She was kind. She was very committed to making an impact at her college community. I saw it and I immediately admired it. Because of my experience at the A&T Admitted Students Day, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally want to be Miss Maroon and White. But at that time, I was just a freshman. Again, the thing about the AUC that is so unique is that there are so many politics. And so the politics involved in pageantry was always this like hierarchy system. I had never even really watched a full pageant before, let alone compete in one. I didn't know what it would take to be a campus queen. All I know is that I saw it and I felt drawn to it and I wanted to do it. And so for me, the first logical step was to do a pageant my freshman year to kind of get on the radar for people. A lot of HBCUs will have like a Miss Freshman. For us, the thing that was like kind of bigger than Miss Freshman was Miss RHA. I cannot tell you, I don't remember what RHA stands for. Residential Housing Association, Advisors, Administration, Residential Housing. I'm just going to say association. And basically, there are freshman dorms on both Spelman and Morehouse's campus. Each of these dorms has kind of like a student government. So you can be the president, the vice president, the secretary, whatever for this particular dorm. Each dorm would either appoint, interview, or put on a mini pageant in order to crown somebody as their dorm queen. That dorm queen would then compete against the other dorm queens of the other Morehouse College freshman dorms, and the winner of that would become Miss RHA. So in a sense, the pageant was freshman girl versus freshman girl. Therefore, it was kind of like a Miss Freshman pageant. Okay, now that we have a little bit of the background. So now it's about September. In August, we moved in. We had our new student orientation. We had our first day of classes. Now, I was very social my freshman year. I really just wanted to be outside and make friends. And so because of that, there would be a lot of different guys who would come up to me and be like, hey, would you consider running for our dorm queen? Now, at the time, I didn't know what that meant. But finally, when people explained it to me, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what I would love to do. I would love to do that. Each dorm had a different council or association, so they did things kind of differently. But I specifically remember that there were a lot of guys asking me from the dorm. I can't remember the name. I can see the building. It's the biggest freshman dorm on Morehouse's campus. I think it's called Brazil, but I think it's like pronounced differently. Or is it called Brazil? But it's like spelled like ZEAL. Y'all, I don't know why I cannot remember. Probably because I was traumatized. A lot of guys who asked me to run to be Miss Brazil. I was really excited because, again, I didn't know nothing about pageants. I didn't know anything about the AUC. I didn't know anything about politics. But what I did know was that Brazil was the largest freshman dorm on Morehouse's campus, and that the current Miss RHA, so like the girl who won last year, she was previously Miss Brazil. So I was like, okay, if I'm Miss Brazil, then I have a good chance of winning because y'all got all the boys and y'all are gonna vote for your girl. Like, it's like a random Saturday in September, and I remember like having a time, like let's just say 11 a.m. to go to Brazil and have my interview. So I remember going to the dorm, saying hi to all the guys, sitting down. I think it was the RA who conducted a lot of the interview. I don't remember what they asked me. It was probably stuff like, what are you going to do for us if you become our next Miss Brazil? And I remember being like, what am I going to do for y'all? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Be y'all friend? Like, what y'all want? What is your plan for your year as Miss Brazil? And I remember being like, what are y'all asking me? Like, I have no idea. Needless to say, they were like, okay, thank you so much. And I did not become Miss Brazil. For whatever reason, Miss Brazil was going to appoint their queen after their day of interviews. And so I was not appointed as Miss Brazil. I think I remember me having like 3 interviews, but they were all at the same time. So I had to choose which dorm. I chose Miss Brazil and I ended up blowing it. And I was like, dang, this sucks. Now, I don't remember if my Morehouse brother, Malcolm, shout out to Malcolm, if he called me or if I called him to be like, dang, this happened, or if I saw him around. I don't remember. All I know is that he was like, yo, we're having interviews right now for Miss Du Bois, which was another freshman dorm on Morehouse's college. And he was like, you live in HH, and HH and Du Bois were brother-sister dorms. Again, y'all, the lore at Spellhouse goes so deep. He was like, you should have been running for Miss Du Bois anyway. Come on over here. I'm going to try and get you an interview spot. That way you can run for Miss Du Bois. I was like, okay, period, bet. So I go over there. I interview. I don't remember what they asked me, but I must have done a lot better because they chose me to be one of like the 6 or 7 girls to compete in their pageant. There was only a 2-week time span between like this interview and the actual pageant. I remember being like in a random auditorium. There were about like 30 people in the audience. I asked my freshman roommate if she could choreograph my dance for me. I danced to Don't Think About It Too Much, Too Much, Too Much, Too Much. I have no idea why that is the song that I ended up choosing, but I did. It was a very simple pageant. I remember us having like 1 or 2 practices, and then like the old girls who were the previous like Miss Du Bois and her first attendant and second attendant, because that's a big thing at Spellhouse where you will have your winner, and like the first runner-up and second runner-up will be the court. And so the court will be able to reign for the entire year, not just the one winner. And so I remember having like practice where the court would come and they told us like, oh, like this is how you do your introduction and this is how you talk. And it was like, okay, cool, bet. I had a really good audience of people there cheering for me. And I go ahead, I do my introduction, I'm killing it, I'm slaying it, I do my talent, it's cool, everything's fine. And then it's time for onstage question and answer. And I did not practice for onstage question and answer. I don't remember even thinking about it. I hadn't even seen an HBCU pageant at this time to know kind of like what to expect or how big of a deal it was. It was something that I was just like, I'm clearly going to go. I'm going to do this. I'm going to win because like that's what I do. Like it was just so ignorant and naive of me. Really, the word is like naive. I was a college freshman and I was like, okay, like I'm clearly gonna do this thing. Mind you guys, at my high school, we didn't have high school queens. At my high school, we didn't have a pageant to name somebody as like the Miss North Point or the Miss Westlake or the Miss La Plata High or the Miss Largo High. Like we didn't have that. I know that they do have that at a lot of southern high schools, but I didn't have that experience. So this was legit my first pageant, not only watching but also participating in. And for the most part, the reason why I was able to even hold my own on stage was because of my years of being a performer and a dancer. I don't even remember what question they asked me, but let's just say they said, why do you want to be the next Miss Du Bois? And I hadn't even thought of an answer. And I'm pretty good at talking. Like I never had an issue with speaking. So I guess I just thought, I don't know what I thought, but I'll tell you what I said. I. And I remember like looking at my friends in the audience and they were like recording and being like, oh, no, y'all, I didn't even place, like I didn't even get to be the first or like the second attendant. Like I completely bombed the pageant. And I was so like, I wasn't that embarrassed. Like I was upset and I was like, dang, I really messed that one up. But I was like, okay, I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt okay because it was such a small pageant. Like a lot of people, probably even like my Spelman sisters and my Morehouse brothers who graduated the same year as me, probably don't either remember or even knew that I did that pageant because there were literally 30 people in the audience. A couple of the boys who lived there their freshman year, and like all of the girls had like a couple of their girlfriends there. So I was like, dang, I'm embarrassed, but also like a lot of people really don't know that this happened, so I'm just gonna pretend like it didn't happen. But that was my first pageant. I'm gonna fast forward to my next pageant. I'm gonna try and go through it quickly because it was actually that same year. So as I mentioned, Miss RHA was like the Miss Freshman, but technically there was a Miss Freshman pageant. And this ended up being brought up to my attention a couple of weeks after kind of like the Miss RHA phase. And there were also guys who got elected for a leadership position for their class council. So they were like the freshman year president, vice president, secretary, etc. They were in charge of hosting and planning the Miss Freshman pageant. Early October, they started reaching out to girls if they wanted to compete for Miss Freshman. And I was like, absolutely, I need to redeem myself. I do believe they ended up having interviews. So I interviewed, and I think that you also had to like show your talent. And I remember doing the same talent that I did at Miss Du Bois. And I was like, okay, I'm in. Ended up becoming one of the contestants. We ended up practicing for like 2.5, 3 weeks. And I remember the practices went over the timeline of homecoming. So if you guys scroll all the way down on my Instagram, there's this picture of me in like a blue dress on a car, and I'm like Miss Freshman float, because actually what ended up happening was that because we didn't have our Miss Freshman pageant before homecoming like they were supposed to, but they were moving so slow, because they didn't end up having the pageant, they allowed all of the contestants to have their own float as like Miss Freshman float. So there was like a banner in front of us that were like Miss Freshman contestants or something like that. So I ended up riding in the float my freshman year for homecoming, which was a really cool experience. Shortly after that, they ended up canceling the pageant. They canceled the pageant. I don't remember the reason why. It was something along the lines of like, they just didn't have their stuff together. Like the people, I don't know who it was, so it's no shade to you because I don't remember who you were. But whoever the class president of the Morehouse College class council for 2018 was trash, because they canceled the pageant because they couldn't get it together. Like they couldn't get together in time. So my freshman year, I was kind of disappointed because I didn't end up having my debut in pageantry like I hoped. I'm going to pause at this time to share with you all my Miss America origin story, because I also think that this is super sweet. So I mentioned before, but my freshman year best friend, her name was Erica. You all, again, if you watch the vlogs, you know, like Erica and I were like this. We were attached at the hips. That was my girl. And she was from Mississippi. And the thing about Erica is that she competed in pageants. So she competed in the Miss Mississippi Teen USA pageant system. So if you guys aren't familiar, especially at this time, we're talking about 2014, there were two large American pageant systems, the Miss USA system and the Miss America system. So at this time, I believe she had competed for 2 years. I don't remember if she like didn't place her first year and then she placed her second year, or if both years she placed third runner-up. But I just remember her senior year of high school, she competed at Miss Mississippi Teen USA and she got third runner-up. And now it was our freshman year of college and she had an opportunity to compete again, because I think like she wasn't 19 yet, or I don't really remember the logistics because I've never competed as a teen before. But the point is that she was preparing to compete for Miss Mississippi Teen USA. So as my best friend, we would often talk about what she was doing to prepare for the pageant. So she was like wearing the same dress, and like sometimes she would practice like her walk, and she would talk about like her interview. And just as a friend, I would listen. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I would just listen and nod. And one thing that she would talk to me about was the fact that she had a mentor, and her name was Jasmine Murray. What was so impressive was that Jasmine Murray was the Miss Mississippi at that time. Not Miss Mississippi USA, but she was Miss Mississippi, and she was a Black woman. Now, already in the Miss America organization, being a Black title holder is a pretty big deal, but especially in a state like Mississippi. And so it was really inspiring. Like Erica just loved this girl. She really admired her. She looked up to her. And so because of that, she would talk about her all the time. And so I began to look up to her and admire her. And I was very inspired by her story of, you know, competing a couple of times and finally winning the title of Miss Mississippi. And so one day, Erica invited me over to her dorm room to watch Jasmine compete at Miss America 2014. And y'all know me, I'm always going to root for everybody Black, but specifically I was like, I feel like I kind of know this Jasmine girl, so I'm going to root for her. And that was my first time watching like a Miss America pageant from beginning to end, especially watching like one particular person. I know that I've seen bits and pieces of Miss America pageants before, but that was definitely like my first time watching it from beginning to end. And I'm rooting for Jasmine Murray. She's already one of the only Black girls there, and then she ends up being like one of the only Black finalists. And I just remember being in awe of her, thinking that she was just so amazing. Like she was beautiful, okay, skin amazing, hair looked great, body snatch, like she could just do no wrong in my eyes. I don't even remember specifically what her talent was, but that girl could sing. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, like I know the next Miss America. Like I don't know her, but because my friend knows her, then I know her, so she's gonna win. Like, and anyway, unfortunately Jasmine didn't end up winning, but fortunately I got the pageant bug, and especially because I saw so much of myself in Jasmine. Simply because she was a Black woman, I was like, oh my gosh, if she can do it, like I can do it too. Okay, so back to the timeline. Now let's talk about my sophomore year in college. And the reason why I have to go year by year like this is because, especially when I first started off posting about pageants, people were like, oh my gosh, how come you didn't compete in pageants in college? And I wanted to be like, yo, I tried. I tried. I really, really tried. That theme holds true my sophomore year because I had another secret pageant that I never shared with you all. I competed in the Miss Black and Gold pageant. Yes. I competed for Miss Black and Gold 2016 for the Alpha Rho chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. It is true. I have to go into detail about that at a later time and date. I really have to pick this up. We're already like almost an hour in and I'm just at my sophomore year. I remember going to the Miss Black and Gold pageant my freshman year. It was on Halloween, and one of the girls who I admired a lot all throughout my Spelman experience knows that I adore her because she's my mahogany big number. So whenever I see her in person, I'm like, you are that girl. You have always been that girl. You will always be that girl. Like, she is just that girl. And I remember watching her compete at Miss Black and Gold and being like, she should win. She's the best. She's amazing. I was like, if she want to do Miss Black and Gold, that means I want to do Miss Black and Gold. And again, I already loved the alphas. I enjoyed my experience strolling with them. So I was like, I would love to represent your fraternity and compete for the title of Miss Black and Gold. In my humble opinion, I believe that Miss Black and Gold is the best fraternity pageant at the AUC. Personally, I felt like the contestants was always really competitive. I felt like the court was always so impressive. I felt like the pageant itself, the quality of the pageant was always so high. Once I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is totally something that I would want to do. So my sophomore year, when I see like the casting call for contestants, I am there. I remember that being like such a hard pageant interview because they asked me like a lot of tricky questions. But at that time, I was a sophomore. I had done many more interviews at that point, and I had just learned a lot about myself, how I wanted to carry myself, who I thought that I was, and all the things. I was so excited for that pageant. I just knew that I was going to slay and either win or just be a part of the court. And what was really cool about the fraternity courts is that the top 5, everybody in the top 5 ended up being a court. And I was like, I think I could at least make top 5. So I think that I will have a chance of being a part of the Miss Black and Gold court. And I'm so upset because I actually have vlog footage from this. I ended up losing when one of my laptops broke, but I literally remember vlogging my pageant experience, and I was like waiting for the pageant to happen in order to release the footage. Well, our pageant ended up being placed on hold a week before our unveiling because of chapter issues. There was a line happening at the same time, and a couple of months after the pageant was said to be on hold, the line and the pageant was suspended indefinitely. And y'all, it was the entire fall semester of my sophomore year. We can go into all of the trauma that happened because of that situation, but y'all, we got to move forward. So let's move on to junior year. Now, the crappy thing about junior year was that this was the year that you would run for the campus queen. At this point, I had an unsuccessful freshman year. Now, there are no prerequisites to competing for your campus queen. But again, with politics, I always saw and felt like you had to have at least one pageant title underneath your belt before you competed as the big Miss Campus Queen. Again, this is all just like AUC politics and hearsay, but it was very real for my experience. So fall semester of my junior year, I am locked in. I'm ready. I'm like, yo, I gotta do a pageant before the spring. So I remember talking to the ARO bros and then being like, yo, we about to bring the pageant back. It's gonna happen this fall. And I remember being like, I don't know, y'all, because I wasted my whole sophomore year preparing for that pageant. And even like in the spring semester, they were like, y'all, we're gonna bring it back. We're gonna bring it back. Like if all the girls come back, we don't have to do like the whole interviews and stuff over again. Like we can just pick back up where we left off. And I was like, okay, I'm down. Didn't happen the fall semester my sophomore year. It didn't happen the spring semester my sophomore year. But they were promising me that it was going to happen the fall of my junior year. Now, the other option was to run for Miss Junior. And I was like, y'all, I really want to run for Miss Junior because y'all playing games. And they were like, no, we promise you, like, we finna have the pageant this fall. They did not have the pageant. They did not have the pageant in the fall. So come spring of my junior year, I was, for lack of better words, insecure about running for a campus title because I felt like there were a lot of girls who up until that point ended up being Greek, were on the cheer team, were Mahogany Emotion, and/or they had previous titles as our Miss RHA, Miss Freshman, or like Miss Omega Psi Phi, Miss Phi Beta Sigma, whatever. So I was like, I don't really know if people are really gonna vote for me if they've never seen me compete up until this point. And I won't go into the full story now, but what I will say is that, as you all know, I never competed in that pageant. I never ended up competing for Miss Maroon and White, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. I did try to compete at Miss Maroon and White, and I ultimately was not chosen to be one of the contestants. And the reason why I share this is because this left a really big gap in my heart. I always said that I just had a few things that I wanted to get done or to accomplish in college. And one of those things, because of that NCAT experience, I wanted to be a campus queen. And I was heartbroken, so heartbroken when that wasn't my reality, especially with the way that things ended up going. It felt so like out of my control. People really showed their true colors during that time, whether they wanted to support me or they felt intimidated by me and they wanted to take me down, or I don't even remember. Especially in college, I had a really hard time seeing myself. So I was so flabbergasted as to why so many people were intimidated by me to the point where they literally wanted to stop me from even competing. But ultimately, these people end up having more pull or power or influence or whatever over me, end up getting their way, and I was not able to compete for the title of Miss Maroon and White. Now, something that's also really interesting about that time is that up until that point, I still had not been successful at auditioning for my college dance team, any of my Mahogany Emotion auditions. And what's crazy is that you couldn't do both at the same time. You couldn't be both Miss Maroon and White and a Mahogany Emotion member at the same time. And so I had auditioned 3 times at this point. And then the Miss Maroon and White application started to come out. And I was like, well, bump Mahogany. Yeah, bump Mahogany. I have given y'all plenty of time. Clearly don't want me to be a part of your organization. Yes, this is one of the things that I wanted to do before I left college, but I'm going to go ahead and give this up because I really want to do this other thing. I didn't end up being able to do the other thing. When I wasn't able to do the other thing, my big sister Terry literally dragged me to audition. She was like, you are going to audition for Mahogany Emotion, and I don't care what you say, you're going to auditions. And I was like, no, I'm not. You can't make me. She was like, you better be there at auditions. I was like, I ain't going. I was like, girl, I ain't going. I haven't made that team 3 years in a row. It's very clear I'm never going to make that team. I don't want to audition again. I'm going through a hard time. My heart was just broken because I've always wanted to do this pageant and now I can't do it. And she was like, please just show up. I show up, and lo and behold, that was the year that I was able to officially join the dance team and eventually become Mahogany Emotion. So it's crazy because if it was up to me, I would have chosen Miss Maroon and White over Mahogany Emotion, but God had another plan. Y'all, I am so afraid that this thing is not recording as I'm talking. You all are so far away that I can't see when it's recording and when it's not recording. And so I'm like, Lord, do you want this podcast to come out? Let me know. Let me know if you don't want this podcast to come out, because I promise you, I will. Maybe I'm not supposed to be spilling tea. I don't know. What's going on, Lord? Be play with me. Speak, Lord. If this is not supposed to happen, please stop it, because I have a feeling that this filming is not going like way it's supposed to go. Okay, picking back up on our timeline, it's my junior year, again, spring semester. I'm now a rookie on the dance team, and that summer ended up being recruited in the Miss Black Georgia USA pageant. And this literally just happened very simply. Like, somebody followed me on Instagram. She ended up messaging me and was like, hey, I'm the director for the Miss Georgia USA pageant. We're having a pageant in November. Do you want to compete? I was like, what does it take for me to compete? She was like, you have to interview. You do well, we'll appoint you a title, and you'll compete with that title at the state competition later on this year. So I interviewed, ended up being appointed the title of Miss Black Atlanta USA. And let's just take a moment, because that was my first title. Like, that was the first title. I don't know where that sash is, or else it would be up here as well. But that was like my first sash that I got. I remember, like, I had to pay some money, and then they sent me my sash and my crown. And then I ended up like doing a photo shoot in Atlanta. And I was so excited because it felt like I remember being, oh my gosh, let me take a moment. I wish I may be able to find it in my Snapchat stories. I remember driving to church one Sunday and bawling, crying, because I was so grateful that I was finally living my dream. I remember being like, oh my gosh, like, I finally get to be Mahogany Emotion and I get to be a queen. Like, I actually ended up getting to do both at the same time. I was so grateful. Like, I was so happy. I cannot describe how happy it was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could find videos. I was so happy. And because at this point I had been dreaming of being a queen since literally my freshman year, I knew what kind of queen I wanted to be. And I always bring this up because I feel like everybody's introduction and kind of like their draw to pageantry is important in showing like what about pageantry is going to satisfy them. For example, if I was a person that was very shy and I wasn't comfortable speaking on stage or just being on stage in general, I may feel satisfied the more speaking opportunities I'm able to get if I can say at the end of my pageant journey that I was able to learn how to speak on stage, learn how to speak with people, present myself on stage, etc., etc. Because of the way that I modeled my perfect queen, if you would, from HBCU queens who are very community and specifically community service oriented, I always consider myself to be a community service queen. It was always about what can I do with this title. So even though there was no community service requirement or even like expectation, I was so excited to do community service as Miss Black Atlanta. And so literally my senior year of college, I'm taking a full course load. I am a rookie on the dance team, so I am practicing every single day for hours. And then I'm traveling on the weekends for away games. And then the weekends that I was home, I would try and schedule community service. I don't even think I had a platform, whether it was a Miss Black USA thing or a Miss Black Georgia USA thing. Pretty and purposeful, something like that. It was something along those lines that really reminded me of Beauty and Brains, in the sense of like, we're beautiful, but we also care about our community. So especially in Atlanta, I did a lot of work with houseless communities, domestic violence, young girls, mentorship. So I did like some fashion shows, photo shoots, and mind you, this was just me. I actually did a lot during my little reign, especially because I had no idea what I was doing. I think it's because I'm so hungry for it. I would meet people at events. I had cards that I would give people. I would reach out to people like on Eventbrite or like, hey, can I come to this event? I would go to basically anything that I was invited to, and I ultimately just had a really good time. So I ended up competing for the title of Miss Black Georgia USA in November, and this was, I remember, like a week after football season had ended. I also remember us having an orientation, and it was in a far place in Georgia. It was like on a Sunday, and we had a game on a Saturday. So I remember driving my car to the game, me and one of my Mahogany sisters. I drove the car to the game, and then I drove from the game to the orientation. And I remember talking to the director at the time and being like, this is my first pageant for real. Like, how do you do a pageant interview? And she was telling me about like, you're going to have an opening statement and you're going to have a closing statement. And this was like mind-blowing to me at the time, because I was like, girl, why did I ask you? I would not have known. I would not have done that. Also at this point, I am a senior in college, so I am articulate. I've done plenty of interviews before. I'm confident. I have a good understanding of how to present myself, but not necessarily the knowledge of how to do so in a pageant context. So I have talked about my Miss Black Georgia USA pageant experience before, and this is no shade to the organization, okay? This is my experience. I thought that weekend was so unorganized. Now, mind you, the reason why I wanted to be Miss Black Georgia USA was that I wanted to be a campus queen that wasn't available to me, and somebody presented this opportunity and it was similar enough. But I had not watched a Miss Black USA pageant before. I don't even think it really clicked to me that if you won Miss Black Georgia USA, you went to Miss Black USA. I don't know if I would have enjoyed that or if I would have not enjoyed it. I'm not really sure. All I know is that I competed. We had like an introduction, we had on-stage question, we had talent, and we had fitness, and we had evening gown. Now, I remember being pretty confident about fitness at this point because I had just finished my rookie year, so I was snatched. I remember asking my dance sisters to help me choreograph the talent for my dance and feeling pretty good about that because I was in great dance shape at the time. I remember asking one of my mahogany sisters if I could wear her prom gown, and that was what I wore for evening gown. And I remember getting a dress from H&M to wear for my private interview. I remember leaving my interview and one of the judges was like, I really liked her. And so I felt like very confident, like, oh my gosh, like this is going well. And I remember for my onstage question, it was a hard question too. It asked me something about like Martin Luther King Jr. and it was such a difficult question. And I remember thinking to myself, you are not going to mess up. Like, this was the first time I had had the opportunity to redeem myself from 4 years earlier, my first pageant ever. This was the first time that I was actually able to speak on stage again during an onstage question. And I remember being like, this is not going to be a thing. Messing up on stage speaking because you're so nervous is not going to be a thing. Like, that was a one-time thing. That was a fluke incident. You can do this on stage question and answer. But I was so anxious. Like, I wanted nothing else but that moment to be over. Again, I don't really remember specifically what my question was. I don't think I answered it well, but I remember I said something in a coherent sentence to where I felt proud that I didn't embarrass myself. And to me, that was a win. Mind you, there was no emphasis on like community service or scholarship for this pageant. I don't even remember what was a part of the like pageant package. Ultimately, I ended up winning third runner up. I remember after that pageant, me being like, I hate pageants. I can't believe I held my breath for 4 years for this experience. Like, I remember being anxious the entire time. And at that time, I really hadn't experienced a lot of anxiety. So I was like, I don't like this. And I don't really want to do this again. Like, this is not fun. I did all of this. I spent all of this time. You know, I got all my friends involved and I didn't win. I just didn't like it. Continued to do community service throughout my senior year, and then in May, of course, I graduated. In August, I moved to North Carolina for graduate school. By the way, ever since I watched Miss America in Erica's dorm room, I watched both Miss America and Miss USA every year. Like, I specifically remember, I think it was the summer of my freshman year, watching Olivia Jordan win Miss USA. And she was in a pink ball gown, and I loved her from the beginning. And I remember being at my dad's house in his den and watching the Miss Universe pageant that year. And that is when like the whole Pia, Philippines, Steve Harvey situation happened. And I remember being in his den, watching it by myself and kind of being like, oh my gosh, like, did this really happen? And like not having any like pageant friends to talk about it with. Or I may have had a Twitter at the time, so maybe I went on Twitter, but I didn't even like follow pageant girls online. I was in my own little silo, but I specifically remember like really getting into pageants from that moment. I don't really know when my mindset shifted from the Miss Black USA experience being like, I hated that, no thanks, I guess pageants aren't for me, to, well, let me do some research. I guess I had just been watching pageants enough and I was still in love and enamored by them that I was like, maybe I do like pageants and I just didn't like this pageant. So I decided to do some research on which pageant I felt like would actually be a good fit for me, because ultimately I competed for the pageant of Miss Black Georgia USA simply because somebody recruited me. Somebody could have recruited me for Miss Black America, for National American Miss, for IGM, Miss Collegiate America. And I have mentioned this in some of my early pageant diary videos. I chose the Miss America organization after doing my research because I didn't enjoy my experience in the Miss Black USA system. At that time, I really saw that organization, that pageant, those contestants, and those winners being girls who were the true representation of beauty and brains. I felt like they were all intelligent women. They were known for being intelligent. They had a specific focus. And so after doing my research, I felt the most connected to Miss America, and I was like, I could totally be the next Miss America.